Okay, so the next up is the manufacturer workspace. Now, specifically, I'm going to talk about 3D printing. This is how we would typically manufacture some of these parts. Now, there are two ways that you can 3D print something from Fusion 360. Now, the first is what most people do at the moment, which is using a third-party slicing software. What you do is you export your file, normally as an STL file, and you bring it into your external slicer, create the toolpaths for your printer, and then send it off to your printer. I'm going to show you how to do this. So from the File menu, within Design, you can go down and select 3D Print. You'll see this box pop up, and from here you can select the component that you want to be exported for 3D printing. You can change your refinement. Now what this is doing is it's generating an STL file, and an STL file is effectively a mesh file. What you're seeing here is not a mesh because it has an infinite number of points on each of the bodies. A mesh file is made up of specific faces pushed together and slotted together to form the shape that you want. But ultimately, with a mesh, it never quite has the same detail because it's always based on a number of flat faces. Now the refinement changes the number of points on that mesh. So the more refinement that you have, the smaller each mesh is, and therefore the higher the quality. So typically you want to try and set this to high, and it does make a difference on prints, you can see it. But it does mean that you have to generate a more complicated mesh. So if you have a low-level computer, you might want to consider using a slightly lower refinement. You can go in and change some of the refinements here, talking about the different meshes specifically, but we normally just leave these. Finally, you have this Send to 3D Print utility, which allows you to send your part to a specific 3D printing software that you can then use to slice. And that will take it from Fusion and pop it directly into that software. Alternatively, what I normally do is you can turn this off, then when you press OK, it'll prompt you to save your file in your main file system on your computer, and then from there you can upload that to your main or download that to your main slicer software. This will generate your STL, and then you can use that to 3D print your part. However, there is a different way that you can do this all within Fusion. The way that you do this is you go into the Manufacturer workspace, and from Manufacture you can see that there's lots of different ways that we can manufacture parts. We can use milling, turning, additive, inspect, or fabricate. Now these are all different manufacturing processes, and Fusion, the Manufacturer workspace, allows you to output toolpaths and code that go directly to those machines to create your part. Now I'm not going to talk about any of them like milling or turning, they're slightly more complicated and you have lots of different toolpaths that you can apply. But I am going to quickly touch on the additive section of this, because what we're doing with 3D printing is additive manufacturing. What we can do is we can find our model, and we're going to pretend to 3D print one of our feet, for example. So I'm just going to go in, select one of our leg blocks, that one it seems, isolate it, just so we can see what we're looking at. From there, I'm going to create a setup. I'm going to select my machine. Now, I have behind me a Ender 3. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Ender 3 as my machine. It'll put in our print volume, so we know how big it is. And I'm going to make sure additive is selected and that my model is selected. Click OK. You'll see your part jump into the middle. We know it's not too big, we can see that. And we now have all these tools that we can use to generate or slice our part, a bit like a normal or different slicer would. First thing we can do is place our parts on the platform. We can move them manually, but it's actually very easy to place parts on the platform. Instead of components, choose a flat face, and then select this back face. Click OK, and you'll see that it gets put flat on our build platform. Now I've chosen that back face because it allows us to 3D print quite easily, but it really depends on how you want to orientate your 3D print, and it depends on your design. This is just a fairly easy way that we could do this, especially with this detail in the middle. From here we can select our print settings. Now we're using ABS, 1.75mm diameter filament. Again, once you get into this a little bit more, you can look through all the details and you can change the specific settings from the main settings if you want to go in and change specific parts. You can change the infill, I'm going to make mine gyroid because I think it looks cool. Generate infill. You can generate supports. And then from there, you can generate your part, your toolpath, and it will create your toolpath. And then you can simulate your additive toolpath from there as well. And you can simulate it just by pressing play, and it will build it up, and you can check that your path is being generated in the correct way. You can see here as we go around, I have this really cool infill that I've chosen. That's just gyroid, but you might use rectilinear or another infill. And we can see how our 3D print is being built up in the manufacturer workspace. Once you're happy with how it's being made, you can see the supports in a different color. We also have a brim going around here, and I'd say that's looking pretty good. So once you're happy with the simulation, you can just close that and then post-process, which means you're sending it to create the code. I don't have my post-processor set up, but you do use that, it generates your code, and then you can save that as a file to send to your proto. That's a really, really quick rundown of how you can use additive to 3D print from Fusion 360. There is quite a lot of detail in the entire of the manufacturer workspace, so I'm not going to go into it in these set of videos. But there is a lot that you can do with milling, turning, and all sorts of other types of manufacturing. In the next video, we're going to go through engineering drawings, which is one of our last sets of videos and our last workspace that we're going to be